Today, we're going to unpack an idea that is super simple, but honestly, kind of profound. When it comes to money, getting ahead has less to do with what you know and a whole lot more to do with how you act. It's not some hard science. It's a soft skill. It's all about psychology and emotion.
Okay, to really get this, you gotta hear this story about two guys. On one hand, you've got Ronald Reed. He was a janitor his whole life, lived super frugally, and just quietly put his money away. When he passed away, people were shocked to find out he was worth $8 million. Then you have Richard Fiscone, Harvard-educated, a high-flying finance exec, made millions, and ended up completely broke.
Right? How on earth is that possible? It wasn't about being smart. The janitor just had simple, patient habits. The brilliant executive, he was driven by greed and impatience. I mean, think about it. What other field can someone with zero formal training so totally outperform someone with the absolute best education? Well, in finance, it happens all the time. And that brings us right to the core idea of this whole explainer. Doing well with money has very little to do with how smart you are and a whole lot to do with how you behave. It's not about spreadsheets and complicated formulas. It's about mastering what's going on inside your own head.
So for our first act, we're going to dive deep into the internal psychology, the stuff in your head that really runs the show when it comes to your money.
The first thing you have to understand is that no one is crazy. The financial choices you make, they seem perfectly logical to you because they're based on your own unique experiences. You know, if your parents grew up during a war, they might think the stock market is a total scam. If you grew up watching people build businesses online, you might chase that dream. We all make decisions based on our own little slice of the world, and it's so important to get that before we judge anyone else or even ourselves.
And that leads us to this huge psychological trap, the danger of not knowing what enough even means. You know, the hardest financial skill by far is getting the goalposts to just stop moving. Social comparison is a game you can't win. There's always someone out there with more. I mean, look at Rajat Gupta. He was a CEO already worth $100 million, but he wanted to be a billionaire. He started insider trading and boom, ended up in prison. He risked everything he had and needed for something he didn't have and absolutely did not need. It's just foolish.
Which brings us to a point that you have to get right. The definition of true wealth. Wealth is not the Ferrari. It's not the giant house. That's just spending money. True wealth is what you don't see. It's the money that's sitting in an account, quietly growing. It's all the financial assets that haven't been turned into fancy stuff. One gives you bills to pay, the other gives you freedom and options.
All right, let's move into Act 2. We've looked inside our own heads. Now let's look at the surprising external forces that shape how wealth is actually built out in the real world.
We love to believe success is all about skill, right? But we completely underestimate the giant roles of luck and risk. Just look at Bill Gates. Back in the 1960s, he went to one of the only high schools in the entire world that had a computer. That's a 1 in a million stroke of pure luck. His best friend, Kent Evans, was just as brilliant, could have been a co-founder of Microsoft, but he died in a mountaineering accident before they even graduated. A 1 in a million stroke of risk. Luck and risk, they're two sides of the exact same coin, and we have to respect both of them. Okay, but what about the things we can influence? Well, let's talk about the absolutely ridiculous power of compounding. Warren Buffett is a fantastic investor, no doubt. But his real secret sauce? It's time. The guy started investing when he was 10 years old. By age 30, he had $1 million. Nice. But just look at what happens next. The growth is just explosive, but it only happens after decades and decades. And here is the mind-blowing part. 99% of Warren Buffett's net worth was earned after his 50th birthday. Almost all of his fortune came when he was an old man. So the real lesson here is that good investing isn't about getting the highest returns. It's about getting pretty good returns that you can stick with for the longest possible time. But man, sticking with it is hard, isn't it? The market goes nuts and we all panic. We have to reframe how we see this. Market volatility, all that fear, the doubt, the regret, that's not a fine you pay because you made a bad decision. That is the price of admission. It is the fee you have to pay to get into the wealth-building game. And if you can accept that fee, you can stick around long enough for compounding to work its magic for you. So how do we pull all this together? In our final act, we're going to combine all these lessons into a personal philosophy, a playbook that you can actually use. First, we have to totally redefine the goal. The highest form of wealth isn't a fancy car, it isn't a bigger house. It's freedom. It's the ability to wake up every single morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. That control over your time, that is the highest dividend money will ever pay.
So let's boil it all down into a philosophy you can act on. It really just comes down to three things. Number one, redefine your goal. You're not aiming for a number on a screen. You're aiming for freedom and control. Number two, build your engine. The most powerful tool you have is a high savings rate. And number three, master your strategy. That means focusing on survival, because you have to stay in the game if you want to win it. Let's really focus on that engine for a second, your savings rate. This is so much more powerful than how much you make or what your investment returns are because it's the one thing you have the most control over. Wealth is really just the gap between your ego and your income. The more you can squash that desire to spend money to show people how much money you have, the more you can save. And saving is what buys your freedom.
And finally, your master strategy, survival. You have to realize that getting rich and staying rich are two totally different skills. Getting rich, that often means taking risks and being optimistic. Staying rich, that requires humility and a healthy dose of fear that it could all go away. And the math here is just brutal, but you have to know it. A 50% loss requires a 100% gain just to get back to where you started. That's why just surviving, staying in the game, is the most important part of any financial plan. So in the end, we turn this all back to you. Your financial reality is shaped so much more by the stories you have in your head than by the numbers in your bank account. Is your story, oh, I'm just bad with money? Or is it, you know what, I'm getting better with money every single day? Because that story, it becomes your reality. So what's the financial story you're telling yourself?